You're listening to A Seat at the Tech Table, a podcast by Sisters in Tech, hosted by Anna and Esther Kofarigi. This podcast highlights the experiences of Black women working and thriving in the tech industry. You'll learn about how they found their paths into tech, and hopefully you'll be inspired to consider whether there's a seat for you at the tech table.
Today's guest is Linda Agbontaen, a UX consultant based in London.
Welcome, Linda. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
Okay, so we just want to get to know more about you.
Sure.
What you do, where you're from.
Okay. So I'm Linda Agbontaen. As you said, I'm from London, born and raised. Spent most of my life here, actually. I'm currently working for a leading financial consultancy as a senior UX design consultant. Beyond that, I've probably spent about 7 to 8 years in digital. So yeah, I've had a variety of different UX roles, so can kind of talk to different aspects, different angles, and happy to share my story.
Okay, so tell us a bit about your background. How did your interests get you into tech?
I was more so interested in kind of the human aspect of understanding people, like, you know, how their mind works and quite weirdly, their behaviours. So I studied psychology with the intention of one day going into a role and applying that, which is quite interesting because now I'm in a role that looks at, I would say, digital psychology, because it's the same thing in that you look at users, you understand how they... you understand what they need, how they behave, and then you design digital solutions for them. Okay. So somehow it's kind of led me there, even though I didn't take an IT route.
Okay, so I'm quite interested in understanding how you made the transition or the link between psychology into tech.
I mean, so going back to when I studied psychology, I didn't necessarily know at that time what I wanted to do. I knew I was interested in like the analytical side, understanding people, but I guess making that link, I didn't take, like I said, the conventional route. It wasn't until my kind of final year in uni that I took a course, or a module rather, on, I think it was called Workplace or Technology in the Workplace, something so obscure. And everyone on my course was like, what does that even mean? Like, because we'd been studying cognitive psychology, we've been studying, like, you know, how the human memory works. And so to make that leap, it was quite weird, not weird, but at the time, it was quite new to most people. So I actually found it fascinating. I loved understanding, you know, how you study emotions and tie that back into designs. So we're looking at a lot of experiments that kind of linked between the human mind and kind of designing, and it was emerging. And I say it like I'm quite old, but like back in the day. But it wasn't. It was more so that it was a new field. So it's UX as a discipline, as a domain, is quite new. So it was just an emerging field and quite new and exciting for me. So I just found it fascinating. So that link kind of naturally emerged from that module. But actually, I then went into. I was fortunate enough to kind of speak to the right lecturers and have the right connections, introductions, and then go into a graduate scheme. So that was, very luckily secured a role where I was working part-time, well, they say part-time, I was working part-time, so 30 hours a week within the technologies department, and then they sponsored my master's to do human-computer interaction, which wasn't called that at the time, so that's why I sound quite old, but that's kind of how I made that link, and it kind of came naturally because UX, even though it sits within the digital space, it's still about people at the end of the day, and so psychology, like, wherever there's people, there's a need for it. So I think it's quite natural, and it's probably going to become more of a way in, maybe down the line, because I think it's going to come back to when you start to think about all these new capabilities like microservices, AI, you're still going to have to come back to actually what's the experiential side and what does that mean for users. So I think more and more people start going back to psychology as the way in to get that understanding and then go into the design side, I guess.
So tell me a bit more about how you actually got into your role. And with that role, I'm speaking more specifically about the internship. So you told us that your lecturer told you about certain opportunities. So tell us about how you knew this role was the right role for you and what exactly you knew before getting into the role.
I don't know, like, I think it just comes back to I'm just a strong believer of energy and vibes, and you don't always necessarily know the right route, but I just believe that sometimes that intention is set out for you, and it comes through energy, and also there's a lot of things that just naturally fall into place. So as far as me knowing that was the right path, I didn't, again, at that time, whilst I had studied psychology and I'd taken the module, I didn't exactly know, okay, this job is where I'm going to be in the next 20 years. But I knew that was where I was passionate about, excited about, I wanted to continue doing. But then to go back to your question about to make the application. So the lecturer, that was a first instance, I guess in your 3-year tenure at uni, and you have different lecturers, etc. But that was the first time I spoke to her. She was a woman. She was working. She had experience at IBM, Microsoft, and it was exciting. I was just like, you just buy into somebody's, their demeanor and their approach, and I could tell that what she was doing was good and kind. And then as far as going into the workplace, so. American Express offered that graduate scheme, and there were 2 people, funny enough, from my uni on that course that had gone into it. And I don't know, there was just a natural link into kind of taking my interests, psychology, being creative, working in the digital space at the time. Like I said, it was kind of social media was a big thing, and then understanding interactive technologies was a big thing, and I was just in that zone. So the application process for me, it was just one of, okay, and it's probably one of the first places I applied to, but I knew that everything has kind of set its path for that, if that makes sense. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
And I guess another question I have is, how do you feel your studies in university align with what you actually did in practice?
I mean, like I said, they set you up. So cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, that sets you up for a number of different principles as far as design, understanding the philosophy as well. But then HCI was more practical, so that was the masters that I took, and that was where we were really studying cognitive psychology in addition to usability, in addition to ergonomics, in addition to multimedia, in addition to actually coding. So that was more practical, and then actually having at that level, you're actually being involved in more of, I guess, more projects that are real life. So yeah, I was being involved in projects down in Brighton and actually playing out what we were learning.
So we have a kind of a period of time between the Masters and that original role of American Express and now. So what was that intervening period like? What other roles did you have?
Between my Masters, so I actually went straight from uni for my bachelor's degree. That was one of the first places I applied for, and as I said, I was quite lucky in that I completed my studies and went into work.
And then after that, what did you do?
So I stayed at American Express. So the graduate scheme was 2 years. Within that time, you do rotations around the business, so working within technologies and a space that was called interactive technology, but it was basically between marketing and tech, because they didn't really know what digital was. So it was kind of weird. But it was that space. I worked in that space and then moved into more of a UX marketing role. So was managing and working a lot with kind of our partnerships, or American Express partnerships with TripAdvisor and Foursquare. So I was working quite closely with creative agencies, our internal marketing teams, and actually defining end-to-end journeys and delivering programs. Mm-hmm. So then I spent, I guess, about 4 years, and I felt that, I'd studied, I'd executed somewhat, but I wanted to get my hands more dirty, as in, from a UX standpoint, I think that there's so many different facets, and until you're actually designing in situ, you don't really appreciate it. So I wanted to make that leap, so I moved into e-commerce redesign role. And that again was quite different because it was more of an architect role. Mm-hmm. So it was looking at kind of end-to-end, kind of navigating users, because this e-commerce platform had been in existence and never really, it was a point in time where they wanted to think about, how it made sense in the new kind of experiential world, as it were. So I was doing that for a while and then moved, for some reason I get pulled back into finance. Then I moved back into finance, where I currently am, but I've had a variety of different roles there because I was working for an asset manager, again, looking to bring digital into their, arsenal. And then, so that was like setting up the team, driving the strategy for that. And then that's kind of taken me to where I am now. We're consulting with financial services companies. So
kind of bringing ourselves up to date now.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting, because I think one of the things that people find challenging about getting into tech and really getting into any industry is the job application process. So you spoke about the original graduate scheme that you applied for.
Yeah.
So could you tell us about the application process for your current role and what that was like?
My current role. Okay. So actually, I think that I'm trying to recall it. So I think that the current role was a lot. Let me tell you this. So I think from going into a junior, so entry level is quite different to kind of experience level. So entry level, you're doing, because you probably don't have the exact skills. Those kind of the interview process there is slightly different. So you're doing a lot more around kind of presentations. They're looking more around your softer skills, how you actually communicate, kind of how you can make sense and make logical transitions. The kind of experience roles are more practical in kind. So my current application, I believe it was, you have your HR interviews, you have your business interviews. I think I had 2 or 3 rounds with the team there. And then I had a case study. So that one was based on a real life example, and basically I had, I think, like an hour to make sense of the problem, understand what I would do, and then design out a solution. So in this case, it was like an app journey to solve for kind of a proposition for millennials. So it was looking at how I brought that to life, and then how I managed my time, what resources I would need to put in place. So it got quite specific. So it's quite different, I would say. And those are things that I would weigh up as far as going into the interview process, like how experienced are you? Because also I think things like your portfolio maybe also speak to themselves when you're going through those processes. Interview processes. So it might vary.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just need a minute, sorry.
Okay.
So you're currently a UX consultant. Okay. So tell me what like an average day looks like for you.
Hi. Okay. So an average day, I mean, as a consultant, you kind of work project to project. So it varies depending on that project need. So I would say that, I mean, just to take a step back, I think high level, before going into my day to day, as a UX consultant, I make the distinction between kind of 3 pillars. People might disagree, I don't know, but that's how I see it. So I think the 3 pillars as a UX consultant is to actually be involved in the execution, the design. Secondly, the research side of things, so more of the kind of probing, kind of understanding users like you do, like getting to know people, building empathy, delivering recommendations, and then kind of more of a strategic piece. And those kind of, the strategic piece might overlap, but I think that that's more so if it depends on the complexity or the scale of what you're looking to do. So that's kind of how I see it as far as the consulting side. As far as the day-to-day, so like I said, my projects vary. They kind of fall into those buckets, but they're either kind of more strategic, conceptual. So if you're aware of a term called design thinking, where you look at basically problem solving and identifying problems, and then you kind of say, okay, instead of me saying, I think the solution lies here, it's like taking a step back. I think that we should look at this, understand the landscape. This is what a potential solution could look like, proposition, and you design it in real time. Okay. So that's what I kind of spend most of my time doing now, actually. And then the other side of it is projects might be more product design and focus. So actually once you've got your solution, getting more into kind of the detailed design, and that might involve research. So a typical day might be talking to someone to clarify or validate, I don't know, an interface or a design, and then basically iterating on that, building out something maybe in like Sketch or something, and replaying that back, testing, I don't know, and then getting that to a place of where it can be built, and so working with your Scrum team. So yeah, just, I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah,
and it sounds quite interesting because it sounds like you get your hands quite dirty.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're quite involved with quite a lot of the journey,
yeah,
the UX journey. And tell me about the kind of people you work with. What does the team makeup look like?
So my current role?
Yes.
Okay. My current role, so I'll talk to the specific project that I've recently been involved in. So that's more so from an advisory perspective. So I'm working more closely with the business actually, because what we're trying to do is understand how they develop a solution for 10 years' time, where they've recently been experiencing issues, and we want to bring in the teams that are SMEs. So actually, I spend a lot of my time working with the business, working with marketing, working with IT, and then obviously my consultant colleagues to work through, like I said, that problem solving mode through to the solution. So that's kind of makeup and dynamic of the team. My current project, but it might differ depending on the project, the brief, whatnot.
Okay.
Just picking up on, you described quite a diverse range of work. So you have the kind of what you might call more high level strategic thinking, and then getting your hands dirty into the actual sort of making of things.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of your work in that case?
Challenging. You mean in regards to moving through the different types of work, or just generally? What is there something?
Just generally. So because I guess it depends on you as an individual. You might prefer one kind of work, or one kind of work might be more challenging because of the way you have to navigate the cultural workplace, the culture of the workplace to achieve it.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't say necessarily to say challenging, but I think the one thing that you have to be is happy to jump in without having the context. So as a consultant, like you go into a domain where, for example, I've gone into a domain where I've never that's not my background. My background is psychology. So go into a financial investment bank and be able to speak their language. That's, you have to be comfortable with, you're coming in to do something and you're not going to be the expert in the room. So being able to facilitate, navigate those conversations and get to a place that ultimately gives you the right solution, that's something you have to do. And I think that I forgot what I was going to say, actually. But I think it was something to do with the fact that, you have to take people along the journey with you. And that's something that's quite, it's not challenging, but it's definitely an elephant in the room where you walk into a corporate office, or you go into a company that you don't have that type of experience in, and you have to be that voice in the room that's governing the conversation. Like, that's something you have to bear in mind, of making sure that you're on point.
And that's just interesting to me in terms of being that voice in the room.
Yeah.
That feels like something that you get to, like, I can't imagine that the first day when you walked into work, however many years ago, you were now the voice in the room. But like, how do you get there? Because that's quite interesting.
But I think it does come with experience, and it does, like, gravitas is something that even like senior leaders struggle with, and that's something that you do get comfortable with over time. I wouldn't say I'm there, but I think that the interesting thing is that you still have to be confident. Like, I think that's another conversation for another day, but I think you still have to be, believe in yourself. So no matter what, in day one, you're, as a UXer, whether you're doing research, whether you're designing, you have to be able to articulate your rationale. You have to be able to deliver a message. You have to be able to get the most from people. So however you're comfortable in doing that, I still think you have to do that at any level. And then what that kind of, I guess what's required from you at a more senior level is different, right? But I think you should Yeah, day one, you're definitely not like, hey, see you, you're going to listen to me. But I would encourage that no matter what.
Yeah.
So maybe just tell us a few top tips you have as a UX consultant in terms of navigating the workplace and generally in work.
Okay. Okay. Do you want me to? There's probably loads, and I'm probably gonna miss. Do you want me to say
top
it?
three?
Okay. I'll give you some. I mean, I think the way I like to position this is, what would I tell my day one self? Lord knows it's not easy, you know. So I think know your craft. Number one, know what you're there to do. I mean, when you get into the workplace, there's always going to be politics. There's always going to be a level of bureaucracy. There's always going to be people that, you know, aren't doing what they're supposed to do, but somehow winning. And you're working hard. Yeah. But know your craft, because nobody can take that from you, and you can take that anywhere and do whatever you need to do with it. And I think that gives you the confidence. So that's probably the top one I would say, is just, I don't want to swear here. know your stuff and get it done. And that's like, basically no one can take that from you. So no matter what meeting you're in, what conversation you're in, if you know your stuff, that's it. And in this field...
Just to touch on that.
Go on.
When you say know your stuff, kind of maybe be a bit more explicit as to what people can do in order to kind of like day to day know what they need to know.
Okay, from a UX perspective or consulting. Okay, I think from a UX perspective, there's so many different, like I talked about the course that I've taken, there's so many different courses that you can take, so many things online on the internet. Trust the internet. It can help you if you don't necessarily have the means to go into a course straight away. So there's, I would say, you know, make sure that you're clued up on kind of UX. What does that even mean? User-centric design. What does that mean? And like I said, talking about psychology, talking about the experimental research methodology side, making sure you understand how to actually execute. So keeping up to date on software tools that can help you do that. There's so many. Again, it's hard to maintain. And I would say that that's probably how you get to know your stuff. But also stay in conversation with people in the industry, stay in conversation with things that are happening, like through, I want to say things like Twitter and LinkedIn, but you know, like stay in touch with the changing kind of the different aspects of the domain, and also think about that from not just from a UX design perspective, but what does that mean for technology? What's happening in the marketing space? You know, I don't know, be like, this is probably a life lesson, but be interested and generally want to, you know, keep up to date on general topics. I say that, but I don't even want... It's quite hard, but that's...
I think it's a really good point, because I feel as much as you're a UX consultant and you're aware that technology influences so many industries, it's also understanding that as a UX consultant, that's a field that you specialise in, where you have to be aware of like the different industry landscapes that it might affect.
Because also it's about people, right? And so when people talk about user experience, there's certain practices, there's certain skills, there's methodologies, there's principles, there's things that you can do in practice, but it's about people again. So it's about the way in which experiences are triggering desirability. So to give you an example, the way in which, when I studied technology in the workplace, it was all about making sure that the interface was legible. And then slowly down the line with Apple, you've seen that experience matters. And so the change is actually on driving and triggering emotive factors that help people feel as though they can trust, you know, the brand. So it's like, it's beyond just UX as a discipline. It's more about understanding kind of external factors that influence people's experiences of things. Does that make sense?
No.
So it's kind of that's why I say like it's making sure that you understand the discipline, but you're in tune with the way things are moving. And that just, again, as a consultant, you probably are looking at that not just from a UK London lens, but globally. Because I remember, and we do this, so when you're researching, talking to people from Birmingham or wherever,
Something I'm really interested in is workplace culture. And I guess for you, you have essentially two workplaces. You have the workplace culture of kind of your consultancy that you work for, as well as the workplace culture of the financial institution that you work for. So can you tell us about the two of them and kind of how you balance them?
Yeah, balance. It's interesting because, so my current role as a consultant, like you say, I spend most of my time, I want to say 95% on the client side, so within their offices, and I spend, it varies week to week, but the rest of my time at our offices. And just to give you, again, not stereotyping, but one is in Canary Wharf, one is in Old Street. Okay. So the dynamic is just different. You know, going into Canary Wharf, going into Old Street, it's just different. But the actual workplace culture, again, that speaks to, I guess I want to say that the reason why I moved into consultancy and where I'm working now is because people were okay, or they encouraged being yourself at work. So, and I could tell, and that's something I value as far as the people. So I think that energy that I get from my office, I guess my main office, is great. And then there's a different dynamic, obviously, when I work in Canary Wharf. And just, I think, like you say, balancing that. I'm in Canary Wharf most of the time. I want to say that I probably don't wear a suit every day, and I probably stick out. I probably wear trainers to work more than I should do. But I think, again, I find balance in being myself, no matter where I am. But again, that takes a lot. It took a long time to get to just, you know, it's okay. It's okay. You know, like, of course, people are always going to judge you, but I'm okay with how I am, how I look, what I wear, how I speak. So going into those different environments, like, that's how I seek balance. It doesn't always work. I think it's different in a corporate environment to the consultancy, because obviously, like I said, it's different in nature. People aren't on their projects, aren't with the clients, so it's different. It's going to be different. I think that answers your question.
No, definitely. But not really. But I just want to pick up on something you said. You spoke about kind of other people's perceptions of you and having to kind of, I don't know if this sounds corny, but grow into yourself, if you will. But I'm interested, do you have any examples of, like, any experiences you had around people's reactions to you? Positive or negative? But yeah, just to give an example and how you dealt with it. Yeah.
So many. I don't know where to start. I'll start by saying that I remember speaking to someone and they're like, "Oh, you're not what I expected." I was like, "Okay, I don't know what that means, but fine." I was like, "I've never met you before. What does that even mean?" But I know what it means. Yeah. So sorry, go back to your question.
So just experiences of the way you've had to deal with people's... having to grow into yourself and having to deal with people's perceptions of you and just kind of getting to that point of, I'm just going to be me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I think, like I said, I don't know how to be anybody else but me. Like, it's so weird. And I know that's a common saying, but I don't. But I think one of the things, I remember having a conversation with somebody in a previous life who was a director, and this, I think it was like a career conversation, and for some reason she mentioned, she mentioned to me, when you're looking to move or you're looking to stay in you're looking for an environment to basically grow and develop your career, look around, like, do you see somebody that in a senior position that you would, I don't know how to say it, but can you point to somebody that you would, want to fill their shoes or be in their position? Yeah. And most of the time, I remember racking my brain and be like, yeah, kind of, but no, I don't know. I don't really see somebody like me. Mm-hmm. So I think that over time, I've just learned how to, like, grow into the person that I would want other people to kind of, I would want to be a role model to other people. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I think, yeah. It's a tricky one because, So I think the workplace is interesting.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but do you feel like you don't have those role models to look up to, and how do you kind of deal with that?
I mean, I think the elephant in the room is I think there are definitely role models. There are definitely people within the workplace, definitely people within the projects, the teams that I work with, that I could see myself, like I can align some of my values to, I could learn from, I can grow from. But I think the elephant in the room is, for the most part, I'm one, London, Nigerian, however you want to say it, black, ethnic minority, one of, a few in the workplace. Yeah, sure. So it's kind of, it's always that, where do you look to if there aren't people that look like you? So how do you learn in that regard? I think that's important, and I know it's like often not said, talked about, but
you're clearly a shining example of a role model in the industry, and it will be interesting to know what you would want to do to take this role forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't. I'm quite noble, I'm quite humble in that regard, but I do recognise that it's important. I do, recognise and appreciate that you should be paving the way. As much as I got into this through uni, and I didn't necessarily have a friend to talk to, or a cousin, or whoever, family, I recognise that it's important for me to kind of, in whatever guise, in whatever light, in however it can come across, to be an inspiration, and make sure that people are aware of the opportunity. Yeah. Like, first of all, I've come from London, I've grown up, I've studied, I've worked through different roles, but there is an opportunity to do something great. So I think, just to add to that, I think that whilst that's the case, whilst that's the reality, it's definitely an opportunity. It's definitely something that I appreciate, and I don't necessarily take for granted. I think that I, in whatever guise I can be, want to be an inspiration and make sure that other people are aware of the route into tech, people, through platforms like this, and I can be a role model for whoever and in however fashion that might be.
So, yes, tell us a bit about some of the projects you are looking forward to working on in the future. Yeah. And some of the different areas you are hoping to venture into. Yeah,
sure. I mean, big question. I think, going back to that top tip, honing my craft, like staying current, staying relevant as far as making sure I understand what it means to be a UX designer in whatever fashion that means for the years to come. I think that's top of mind always. I think as far as projects, initiatives, I think this theme about me being in finance is finally kind of taking its tolls. So I think that there's definitely opportunity, and something I'm really interested in doing is figuring out and kicking off something that helps to scale financial well-being. Because I think, having not been as financially literate going into the industry, that sounds weird, but without having the formal education that you might do in maths or science or whatnot, and then going into the industry and taking back what I know now after 5, 7, 8 years, I think there is definitely a big opportunity to help, like I say, deliver that, scale it, and kind of help everyday people in kind of their financial well-being, personal financial management. And there's a lot of great companies doing it now, a lot of great individuals. So figuring out, I think the differences for me will be bringing people on the journey, because I think that these companies have voices, individuals share knowledge, but they're always kind of tidbits, and you never kind of feel like that's somebody that I can see myself as, and I can definitely make sense of growing my wealth in the same way that they have, because I can recognise myself in them. So figuring out how to do that is definitely, passion for me. Hope to do that and figure out how, it can scale.
So I guess just following on from that, as in, people have stereotypes. Yeah. I guess it's an interesting question. How do you feel like you fit into what might be called a mould, and how do you feel like you differ from it as well?
I recognise that there probably is a mould. I think that there's various different routes. Like we've talked about, there's different roles in tech, and they equally come with their own stereotypes. I think as far as me and some of the points that you've touched on, I didn't see that as a barrier. I saw it more as I've always been creative and always been quite analytical, and for me, going into digital gave me that avenue to kind of design things and kind of, like you say, get into something where I could be more provocative and actually impart some of like myself or my thoughts into something that was truly interactive. So I think as far as like fitting into the mould, I think if you're going down a more traditional coding route, obviously there's stereotypes there, but I think anybody who's, for me anyway, being a creative individual, professional, that's something that I bring, I think that's different to the digital space, and that's probably a good thing as well, because I think the more diversity you have, the different perspectives you bring into that conversation, the better the outcome most of the time. But yeah.
No, that's definitely. And sorry, just I like to follow up.
Go on.
What's coming across from what you're saying is that one of the things that you really enjoy about the tech space is the creative freedom that there is. Are there any more things that you would use to recommend the industry to other people? So creative freedom is one. What are some of the others?
But I think it all comes back to being able to be innovative and be experimental. So yeah, definitely if you're a creative in the loosest sense that you're not a designer, but you have, you're able to think about things differently. You're able to build out a proposition or think about how something could be, drive innovation. I think that those are some of the factors that you should think about. And I would say that that's what's interesting about being in the digital space, is that you can actually then have the freedom to design out, whether it's an app, a new product, a new service, complement an existing business. By bringing your creativity to that, that's exactly what you'll be able to do.
Thank you so much for coming today, Linda. It's been great having you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've learned so much about your journey, and I'm glad you were able to share that with us, share that with the world. So yeah.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See you at the table.
Yay.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode of A Seat at the Tech Table. You can connect with us on our social media platforms. Just search @SistersInTech on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our website www.sistersin.tech to see what we've got going on. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll bring you the next episode soon.